Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, let's talk about Mark Golding, the leader of the opposition. That's Mark Golding, who is the president and leader of the People's National Party, the PNP in Jamaica. Now, some people have been launching their attacks, verbal attacks at me because I uploaded a video last, was it yesterday, day before yesterday, about Andrew Holness, the current Prime Minister of Jamaica. And, I said he will win the election if he keeps the murder rate down and also grows the economy. Now, I would like to advance the theory because these are all projections of theory. It's not You ought not to take it personally because I am a political commentator and I have no interest. Nobody's paying me any money, but let me just advance my topic. Mark Golding will win the 2025 government election, that's the general election, the general government election, if he does the following things: grows the economy, or well, if he projects things to grow the economy, ways in which we can grow that, but it has to be specific. Can't just be some generalized, broad statements that they like to make about doing things when they know that it's not possible. So he has to be specific. What are his specific plans to grow the economy? How is he going to keep the murder rate down, right? And also corruption he has to address. But most importantly, he has to look at the incumbent government, the JLP, and address specific concerns in terms of corruption. It has to be more than the statutory declaration of Andrew Holness. It has to be specific corruption charges against the Prime Minister. And it ought not to be selective because at the end of the day, we know that both of our leaders are corrupt. And that's the problem. The system is corrupt to the core that very few, if any, are, or is, I should say, very few, if any, are. That's the word. Very few, if any, are innocent, right? Very few, if any, are innocent of corrupt activities. I was speaking to my uncle the other day, and he said that he recalls that Muddy Perkins said the following statement. He uttered the following statement, that it is very difficult to be a politician or a business person in Jamaica and not be corrupt, right? If you are going to be a politician and a businessman and entrepreneur in Jamaica, you have to be corrupt, right? You've got to be corrupt. And this is the environment in which Jamaica functions in, right? In which it functions. Now, the fact of the matter is that when I look at politics, I'm trying for you to understand that politics really is a game. It is not something, you are the ones taking politics seriously. But these people are not taking you seriously because you're not demanding anything of them for them to take you seriously. I remember distinctly, an interview with Barack Obama after he had demitted office. And a Black journalist, a Black American journalist, asked him the following question: why didn't you do anything for Black people while you were in office? To which he responded, because Black people never demanded anything of me. So Barack Hussein Obama suggested that Black people had not held him to account, had not demanded anything of him because they just thought that being a Black person, he should be obligated. He should know that he's obligated to taking care of Black matters or things pertaining to Black people. So he didn't, because he did not take Black people seriously. They took him seriously, but he did not take them seriously because they had not demanded anything of him. I say the same thing here now, that Jamaicans are not demanding anything of their politicians. As a result of that, the political leaders, be they PNP or JLP, do not take Jamaicans seriously. They do not take you seriously because you do not demand anything of them. And that is what you have to understand. Now, Mark Golding is the leader of the opposition. But as I have said to you before, I don't know if he is the consummate leader, if he is a very skilled politician. I don't think he is. I think Mark Golding should remain in the private sector and not in as a politician. He's not functioning well in this capacity. That's not his calling. I remember when I was in teachers college, when I was doing my training in education, and most of my lecturers told me that I was not going to be in the high school system for long. They could have seen then that I was not a high school teacher, even though I was trained in secondary education, because they could see that the way how I delivered myself in the classroom was not one in which I was going to be at that level. Nothing is wrong in teaching at that. In fact, I really look up to people who even teach at the kindergarten level. But that's not my forte. That's not my forte to be a high school teacher. Never was and perhaps never will. Can I do it? Yes, I'll do it if I have to do it. But it does not mean that that is my forte. And I would try to avoid it as best as possible if I can. All right? So the PNP should have selected a political leader that they knew could bring home the victory. And that is exactly what the Democratic Party did. And somebody was telling me that, oh, you can't compare the Democrats to the PNP or vice versa. Yes, I can. That's what critical thinking is all about. You can compare apples to oranges if you will, but you have to be skillful. You have to be able to be critical, right? So this thing about, oh yeah, because the US culture is different and history is different from Jamaica, we can't compare both democracies and both, democratic institutions. Yes, we can. And we must remember that human beings are human beings, right? And we all have human nature, and we are vulnerable to many of the things that affect human beings. Right? And politics unveils a lot of times human vulnerability. It exposes human vulnerability. So when we talk about the fact that Kamala Harris, who was a weak candidate to have gone up for the Democratic ticket, and she lost the election because she was not the strongest politician. That's not her forte also. Kamala Harris is not a politician. She's a prosecutor. And she does not have, I'm not suggesting that you can't be both, but that's not her forte. Maybe she has forte in other areas apart from being a prosecutor. But we have to recognize our strengths and our weaknesses where we stand tall. And as far as I'm concerned, Mark Golding is not a politician. Neither is he an effective one. And I say that to say that, one, he is not addressing concerns of the Jamaican economy. He has to address the high cost of living. He's not doing that. Just talking about taxes and what you're going to do about taxes is not running this way. Just talking about housing and you're not saying specific policies that you're going to put in place, because that is what he's doing. He's making these generalized statements and attacking the incumbent government of what he's not doing, but he's not saying what he will do specifically when he enters, should he win the office, right? The office of premiership. He's not telling us what he is going to do. He's just making that the tax policies and the housing policies of the prime minister are corrupt and they might be corrupt. And I think he's right. But he also has to address how he is going to undo some of those corruptions and what laws is he going to implement to as guardrails against corruption, these corruption charges that he's leveling against the Andrew Holness-led administration. We've got to demand better from him, better of him. That's Mark Golding. Now, Mark Golding will also have to address the high murder rates we have in Jamaica, irrespective of the fact that they're suggesting to us. I'm not saying I believe, and many of you were attacking me that, oh, you are a fraud because you're believing that our murder rates have gone down. I am not believing anything. I am just reporting to you what officialdom is suggesting, is saying, is intimating. And if I don't have any other figures, how am I going to debunk what they have said? There's no other research that has been done to suggest that the murder rates were not as what they said, that the murder rates are higher than they are projecting or they have projected. There's no other research done. So how am I going to come here and say that they're lying? I can say based on anecdotal evidence, yes, we can suggest that it really begs the question. When one read the Jamaican Gleaner, the Jamaica Observer, and all the other papers online, Jamaica Online papers, these newspapers were littered with narratives, with stories about violent murders in Jamaica. So I'm very, very aghast, as it were. I'm flabbergasted that there is a reduction in crime, that there were fewer murders evidenced last year in 2024 in Jamaica. I am really, to this day, astonished. But I don't have any other evidence. If you have other evidence apart from anecdotal evidence, remember now that anecdotal evidence is not going to count in court. So if you're going up against the government, you have to go with hard evidence to suggest that what they're talking about is false, right? So I am not suggesting here that I believe that there were 265 fewer murders as the Gleaner reported. What I was suggesting to you, and if you listened to my video well, many of you are not listening keenly to what I am saying. You have in your head your points, and you think that if I don't say them in the way that you want me to say them, then I am a fraud. I do not think like that. I'm a critical thinker, and I'm not going to lower my standards to think the way that you are thinking, right? I did say that the Gleaner contextualized, I give the Gleaner his credit, that even though Jamaica registered 265 fewer murders in 2024, but the stats remain, the fact still remains. The fact still remains that our murder rate is 42 per 100,000. That's a high murder rate by any standards, by any standard. Obviously, if we were coming from 48 per 100,000 or 46, whatever it was last in 2023 and before in prior years, then that would be some reduction. I would call it a relative modest reduction or relatively modest reduction, right? But it's not a significant reduction, as I have suggested here. It's significant in the case that one life is precious. So we have to say that 265 fewer murders in Jamaica would be something that we should celebrate to some extent. Not that there should be anything to gloat over. But we have to thank God that you have these people still alive, because one life murder is just too many. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying and you're not misquoting me and you're not trying to misunderstand what I have stated in my previous video. Okay. Now, more coding needs to address crime and violence, and we need to hear specific policy or policies that he will implement to clamp down on crime and violence, inclusive of which we need to have the restoration of law and order in Jamaica. And I did upload a video some weeks ago, the fact that law and order, the lack of law and order, lawlessness is what is creating the elevation, the high crime and violence that we're seeing in Jamaica. Lawlessness stands at the root cause. If we restore order on the streets and in public places, then I think that there is going to be there will be a significant reduction in crime and violence. But it does not mean, therefore, that because we are going to, the police is displaying greater levels of professionalism and the government is putting lots of money into crime and violence, it means therefore that we're going to have a reduction. And many people think because government puts lots of money, they say they're putting billions or millions of dollars into a particular sector, that you're going to see the efficiency. Money does not translate into efficiency. You have to have the determination, you have to have the gumption, you have to have the motivation, you've got to have the inspiration to get the thing done. And you also have to have some amount of ethical standards to see a reduction or improvement in any sector, including education, healthcare, whatever sector we're talking about. But many people are fooled because they see that billions of dollars. And remember now that when you see these money being injected, being infused in a lot of these ministries, that corruption also, if we have high levels of corruption, these monies are going to be what? Missing. They're going to go missing. They're going to be stolen. So what they should do a lot of time, what the money is tasked to do or is tasked with doing, it's not going to be done because of corruption. So money does not really solve our problems. What we have is a moral decay in Jamaica. So we have to fix that. And we have to fix also the lawlessness that we see there, that everyone can do whatever he wants to do. And people call that freedom, but that's not freedom, right? That's not freedom. When you want to do whatever you want to do, you urinate anywhere you want to urinate. You say anything that comes out of your mouth to authority figures. That is not freedom, right? That is not freedom. That is going to lead into slavery. We are a society that is enslaved, and that is why I call it a grand plantation system. That's why you can't walk around freely, right? That is why you can't move around as freely in that society, because we are not free as you have in your minds. Now, apart from crime and violence, we talked about the high cost of living, and also he must address the whole matter of corruption. There is just too much corruption in Jamaica, and it's coming from the same Andrew Holness and Mark Golding who are speaking against it. And that's the problem we have in Jamaica. We have a system in which the same guys who are guilty as charged, who are part of the same system that we want to dethrone, are the ones who are heading the system. And that is the conundrum that we have in Jamaica, right? So we are looking for the person and we're saying we want to get rid of crime and violence, that we have a lot of criminals in Gordon House, right? We want to get rid of corruption, but we have a lot of corrupt politicians in Gordon House. We want to get rid of the high cost of living, but we have a lot of millionaires in Gordon House whose interest lies with the oligarchs, I should say, whose interest lies with the oligarchs. So how are things going to come down when the oligarchs are determined to wreak more profit? Huh? How is it going to happen? And that is what we have to understand. All throughout the West, people are realizing that the politicians are in bed with the judiciary and also with the economic elites. They are in bed. They control the entire system. And that is why our politicians get away with a lot of murder. Okay? And we often see murder as just somebody killing someone. But the politicians, I should advance the theory that it should be a bigger, because when you see the economy being in decline for so many years, the government is literally killing the economy and people. Because the more impoverished they are, the more they are in violent hotspots where their lives are going to be snuffed out, where they have no education, poor access to healthcare, and other important social amenities. Okay, now Mark Golding is not also giving the impression that he's connecting with the people. And it's not because of his color. It's not because of where his father has emerged, right? Doesn't have anything to do with that. He's just not a politician. Am I a politician? No. I am the first one who would say that I could not function in that sort, in the political environment that is now is. I could not function in that environment. I just could not function in that environment. Why? Because you have to be a hypocrite. You have to be corrupt. You have to steal. You have to lie if you are going to function effectively in this political environment. That is what the environment, that the political environment is all about. So you have to understand these things. These are the things that you must understand. Mark Golding is not an effective communicator in terms of addressing Jamaica's concerns. Now, I'm going to show you here a video in which he is speaking. He's addressing some of the constituents in East Rural St. Andrew. He was at a workers' rally. Now, this is a workers' rally. And I want you to listen to Mark Golding, to Markie G, and to see what he's saying. And very, very amazing. Right? Very amazing to see what he is about. And the fact that he's not really addressing concerns of the Jamaican people. All right, so let's see if we can listen.
Washington Manley, the party of Michael Joshua Manley, Mr. Miller, and Dr. Peter David Phillips, and I man, the one them call Markie G. We are gonna fix the system. Yeah, Mark Wallace. No, you know nothing with you. If you're not showing no progress, one thing or two life, we don't know stress. Be friends with some people that's hopeless. And chat about that things on them school. I just on them tongue back. Mark knows where their bread come from. I cheer up them want see one head one. And when I said them want see where they from. Yeah, man, my bother. Big special, no? So people,
you know,
this next election is a historic election.
It's you just can sense the phoniness in Mark Golding, that there's no connection. It's it's Mavado. And and what was it about? What was that about? And this is what I'm saying. He's not connecting with the Jamaican people. The class tension, the class difference is just palpable. It's quite evident that there is light years away from the ordinary working class Jamaican, the class from which he has emerged, not the race from which he was born with. Right? And in many ways, I think his mother has some form of mixed heritage in her. So I don't even know if Mark Golding would have been considered white in North American culture. His skin tone could pass, but, in terms of his heritage, he might not be. In fact, he's a Jew. I understand he's also of Jewish, but not that Jews can't be white. But the fact of the matter is that the history, for example, in the United States and also in Great Britain, the history in terms of the treatment of the Jews. Okay, but let's continue. We're not talking about the Jews this afternoon.
It's an election that either can leave you where you're now with a member of parliament who said National Party supporters live in garbage. And that you're a member of parliament say about Uno, But when they pass the garbage dump on the roadside coming into Mavis Bank Square, they say, how that go? When is the Labour Party government allowed that dump to develop and people have to pass it and endure the nastiness of that under their government? And when we see the road, and the fact of the matter is, the first time I ever hear a prime minister say, we have an emergency in the country because of road. Why we have a problem with the road? We have a problem with the road because the government has not been attending to the issue of roads.
But that has been, of both governments, both the PNP and the JLP have not attended to our roads. And I think for decades, our roads have not been rebuilt. They have just been patched, right? All they have been doing is patching roads, and roads have to be rebuilt every 2 or 3 years. They must be rebuilt and be properly maintained with substantive and good material. But what we do, we patch them up with these very low quality materials, and they deteriorate as soon as you have rains and any other unforeseen natural event or natural disaster. So, he can't blame the JLP only. Yes, they are in power. They have been in power, and they ought to be blamed to some level because 8 years are long enough for them to have even started. but which they didn't really. Apart from the highways, they have not been paying attention to our roads. And that should tell you where their minds are, where their interest lies, that it's just about giving their oligarchs, the financial oligarchs, money and also getting their cut. Because if they wanted to fix Jamaican roads, they could have, but they have decided not to do so.
They have done nothing to maintain the road network. They like the big projects because they can pop and scrape dollars off it for them and their cronies.
You do too, Mark Golden.
The Jamaican have to try for them.
Right. You too.
Suffer because of the lack of attention and care of this uncaring government.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it have been more effective if Mark had said that I know that we too are guilty, if not whole, if not fully guilty, but partially guilty of not maintained good, decent roads in Jamaica. But what he's suggesting here, that the GLP are the only ones who have been, culpable of not maintaining our roads, which is not true. It's not true. And, Mark Golding needs to be a little bit more honest. I know he's a politician. I know he has to blame, but I think the whole matter of roads is something that has been an ongoing, a long-standing problem, a long-standing issue, and Jamaicans know that both parties are guilty.
As Julian has said, and I want to pick him up because his speech was a very good overview of what we are about. And we will be dealing with the critical issues, the issues of early childhood and primary education, where too many of our children are not getting what they need. And by the time they leave primary school, they can't read and write. We have to fix that. We need to fix the public health facilities so that when you go to hospital and you're sick, you don't have to be sitting on a bench or in a wheelchair in a corridor for days and can't get a bed, suffering the indignity of that situation, and some people don't survive it at all. When we left office in 2016, the JOTC had over 400 buses on the road every day, carrying how many people to them?
Doesn't even know.
62 million riders per year. We are now at 16, and they have just over 200 buses on the road under this Labour Party government. Mismanagement and corruption.
Not bad. That's a good point.
I'm going to check the situation in housing. The average Jamaican can't afford a home in this country.
But why?
The National Housing Trust, they have been raiding it.
You too? The PNP were the ones who started to raid the National Housing Trust, that's the NHT, when they wanted to lower the debt, right? The IMF asked them specifically to do that. And remember when the JLP were out of power at that time, that the JLP pretended as if they were different and that they would have done something differently. And immediately when they came into office in 2016 under Prime Minister Andrew Holness, that they started to also, fleece the fund of billions of dollars that they gave to the IMF. I mean, I wonder what country would have done that, right? Taxpayers' money. And you can talk about national debt, and don't tell me about national debt because perhaps I know more than you do, right? The debt is not owned by us, the working class people of Jamaica and the middle class people for the most part are not the ones who racked up the debt. It is the oligarchs in Jamaica who have racked up the debt that we have to pay. So don't tell me now that, yes, we had to lower the debt. For whom and for whose interest did we have to lower the debt? For purposes like Mark Golding's, because he's himself one of the oligarchs in Jamaica, without a doubt. Now, I'm attacking him based on this, not based on his color. I am attacking him as being a part of that oligarchic class.
Even after we ended the IMF program and we were supposed to be moving ahead without the burdens of those commitments. They have kept taking that money out of the NHD. And when you see what the NHD is building, they're building luxury apartments in New Kingston, selling for over $30 million. What about the workers of this country who need affordable housing? The next PNP
let me see.
We'll have a program of a massive building of affordable housing for the people of this country. All the Operation Pride schemes, which are incomplete, we are going to complete them so that the people get their titles and they have proper road and infrastructure. We're going to deal with other informal settlements.
All right. So do you see how he projects and he gives and he makes all of these sweeping, generalized policy statements, but at the end of the day, how is he going to achieve these grandiose plans and projects? How will he do it? He's not saying that. And Jamaicans who do not have the capacity to think and who are not aware of the geopolitical challenges that the world is facing and how Jamaica is caught up in that geopolitical tension and conflicts, they will buy this, that yes, Markie G is going to give them cheap housing. It's not going to happen. In the first place, Mark Golding suggested that even though we do not have to meet the demands of the IMF, the JLP government still continues to steal funds, to fleece funds from the NHT. Now, we are not sure if the whole matter of, well, we are aware that we have our debt still needs to be reduced, right? We are in the low 70s, almost 70% of GDP. But according to Andrew Holness, and I'm sure that the PNP adheres to that neoliberal philosophy or agenda, that we have to lower our debt to 60% of GDP. So obviously we're still with the IMF. So how does he know that Andrew Holness is not using funds? How do we know that Andrew Holness is not using funds and the PNP will continue to use funds from the NHT? Nobody knows, because our journalists are not doing the job that they're tasked to do. Right? They're not doing it. They don't think that it is their responsibility to inform and to educate the Jamaican public. But based on what I'm seeing in Jamaica now, the political environment is one in which that it is so partisan that it's very difficult to have an intelligent conversation with anybody in Jamaica, from university graduates to the man on the streets. Very difficult because of his lack of understanding of what is happening in the world and in Jamaica at large. Remember now that Jamaica functions in a global environment, in a global economy. Jamaica is not a sovereign state. Jamaica is not a sovereign state as we have suggested. That era left us, long ago, particularly after the 1990s. And we have signed treaties, international treaties, out of which we cannot extricate ourselves. And the same thing is happening in America. People think that Trump, when he says America first, he's going to concentrate on building America, but that's not true. Trump is going to flex America's imperial wings around the world. That is what he means by America first, that America should not function in a multilateral environment, right? It should function unilaterally. And that is what the Democrats believe in too. They only project this hypocrisy to you that they function in this multilateral world. They don't want America's empire. No empire, I have already projected it to you. No empire functions in a multilateral world. They all function in a unilateral world. Tell me one empire. If you talk about the British Empire, the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, they all reigned, yes, in the same time, but they were all fighting against each other. And the same thing we're seeing with the emerging Chinese Empire and other empires, the Russian Empire, right? But the United States wants to what? Dethrone all of them, because it wants to be the unparalleled, the uncontested, right? The unilateral power in the world, right? Which means, therefore, that Jamaica cannot function and operate in an independent sovereign state. All right? We have to understand that. And I think that Ian Boy made some of these points very clearly. We weren't listening to him when he said that most of our policies that impact on us domestically are made in Washington. But our so-called intellectuals are not having these conversations. They think that the decisions are made there in Gordon House and at the Minister of Finance. Right? That is what they have told you, and you believe that. But I would like to inform you, and I would like to educate you, and to unbrainwash your thinking. That's not a word, by the way. Right? I would like you to desist from thinking that we are in control of our destiny, because we're not. And Britain is no longer responsible for us. The king as head of state is just a symbolic gesture. It's just a symbolic gesture because the United States runs the show. And we should have known that long time ago, just by even the Monroe Doctrine that was written in 1823, thereabout, in the 19th century. From the 19th century, the United States, even before she became so mighty and strong, was suggesting, even before she had become a continental empire, before she even arose to the level of a global empire, had suggested that no European power should contest its power in this hemisphere. So how do you think that Britain is going to be running Jamaica with a king as head of state? No, it is the United States. The United States doesn't want to have a colony, so it will allow Great Britain to pretend as if it is the one who is the head of state. It doesn't bother the United States for the king to be the so-called head of state, because when she knows behind the scenes that she runs the show, that King Charles III, is it the third or the second? Whatever he is, King Charles does not run the show in Jamaica, even though he is the symbolic so-called head of state. Get that out of your minds. That is just thing for the Goyim, for those of you who went to university. It's in the books, but it's not the reality. A lot of things that we have learned from the books, and that is why many people, when they leave having studied economics, and they go into the real world, and they see economies, they realize that they are two different. What they've learned in school and what is the real economy, they're just divergent, disparate things and realities. Right? We've got to really educate ourselves and stop aligning ourselves with these political parties. We've got to get knowledge. Knowledge is power. And we have to pray for the wisdom of God. In our national anthem, it says, give us wisdom lest we perish. Knowledge, send us, Heavenly Father. And we sing that every day. And yet still, our politicians are bereft of any vision to lead the nation because they have forsaken God and his principles. They're running after mammon, money. Right? That is what the word mammon stands for money. That is what makes them feel important. And people in general think that money makes them feel important. Right? So Mark Golding lacks the charisma that he needs to be able to connect with the Jamaican population. Now, I think that Mark Golding fails to address, as I suggested before, very important concerns of the Jamaican people. And I think that Colin Campbell, or this guy, Colin, who seems to be a PNP propagandist and one who supports the PNP party. Now, let's just look at what he says. These are the things that Mark Golding has to do if he's going to win the election, right? Look at what this guy is doing. And I think that he needs to carry him on the campaign. You might agree with everything he says, but this is how you win elections. Winning elections doesn't mean that you care about the people, winning elections because you want to win. You want to win your opponent. After you have won your opponent, that's the end of it. And you should all know that. We have been through this since time immemorial. Shouldn't we know that by now, that our politicians do not have our best interest at heart? But let us listen to this fellow and see what he is intimating.
Where one media house and a minister is saying that the government can do road works and then have to borrow no money. And there's another media house that said that the government of Jamaica, in part of last year, 7 months, borrowed over $100 billion. Now, which one is true? Because somebody got to be lying.
Minister Morgan also came on swinging, saying that unlike Mr. Golding's party, the Holness administration is able to undertake extensive road repair.
Isn't it great? Oh, well, I shouldn't say great, but isn't it amazing? Isn't it interesting, I should say, how performative a person like Cliff Hughes is? I mean, he's saying nothing. Always, he gets up every morning and he pretends to be speaking intelligently, and he is absolutely saying nothing. But let's continue to listen to him.
Without borrowing.
The reason the government is able to do this, while previous government, of which Mr. Golding was a part, were unable to do it, is because of how we have managed the economy. We have managed the economy in a way where, for the first time in a very long time, the government has been able to spend money to uplift the country without having to borrow. Now watch this.
Now the details. The government of Jamaica borrowed $102.22 billion during the period April to November of this fiscal year. This was $2.15 billion, or 2.2% more than projected for. Some $55 billion of this amount was obtained from the domestic market and $46.49 billion from the external sources.
So you notice anything different? Do you notice anything different after listening to that? Shirt button around, because that maths, you know, somebody is lying to the Jamaican people. Who do you believe? Stay tuned for more.
Right, so these are the things that he has to do. He has to look at some of these corruption charges, some of these corruption allegations of the incumbent government, and articulate them in the way that this guy is doing, right? You have to be skillful with, but Mark Golding is just there lecturing as he's a university lecturer. Right? I think that Mark Golding should go at the university. He should resign and go to the university as a university lecturer and do his part-time or his full-time position, and, you know, still continue to be entrepreneur, whatever he is, right? Because he does not belong in politics. Because I saw him lecturing in Manchester the other day, the people about taxes and the housing trust, and that's what he was doing. I am telling you that even university students, knowing how short, how their memory and their attention span is so short now, right? It's so limited. I think that many of them would have been bored. Even they who should have some amount of intelligence would have been bored by Mark Golding's delivery. They would have been bored. They would have found it monotonous. Now, I just heard this guy in the audience, right, saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, right? And I'm sure that he understood nothing that Mark Golding was talking about, right? Because it was a lecture, and people at that level don't want to be lectured to. You have to imbibe hope. You've got to give them something to which they can hold on, right? And Mark Golding is not doing that. So until Mark Golding becomes much more engaging and connects more with the people, until he shows us and tells us viable policy options in terms of how he's going to deal with the economy and to bring down the cost of living, also to reduce the crime rate, the high crime rate in Jamaica, and also to attack corruption manfully and to implement laws that will reduce and eliminate a lot of these corrupt activities in which many of our politicians are engaged. Until he does that, I don't see him I can't envision him winning the election. I hope that he will listen to my humble video and that he will try to make amends, or that the PNP will finally decide that they might have to, I don't know if it's too late, to change the leader and allow somebody who is more charismatic and who can take a very clear and engaging message to the Jamaican people. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you like, share, and subscribe. Remember now to like the videos so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. Thank you so much. All the best to you. See you then.